It started with a meeting that everyone in the galaxy was talking about. The Galactic Council, made up of representatives from hundreds of advanced civilizations, had called an emergency session. Nobody knew exactly why it had been called, but rumors were flying fast. Some said it was about Earth. Others whispered that humans had done something unusual, something dangerous. Maybe even unpredictable. Earth had always been different. Compared to other civilizations, humans were loud, bold, and sometimes reckless. While many other species followed rules perfectly, humans often did their own thing. Sometimes it led to breakthroughs. Sometimes it caused problems. But no matter what happened, humans had a way of surviving and even turning disaster into advantage. The Council had noticed, and for years, there had been debates about whether humans could be trusted in the larger galactic community. This time, the debate ended with a decision that shocked even the oldest members of the Council. The vote was clear. Earth had to be expelled. The word expelled sounded harsh even in the quiet, echoing halls of the council chambers. It meant that humanity would no longer be allowed in any galactic alliances. All agreements, treaties, and shared technologies would be cut. Humans would be forced to leave. When the news reached the outer colonies and trading stations, the reaction was exactly what one might expect: confusion, disbelief, and excitement from species who had always considered humans a challenge. In some places, there were celebrations. Finally, they will be gone. Creatures from countless worlds cheered. Messages poured in from ambassadors, diplomats, and even spies, all marveling at the irony. Humans, so often loud and chaotic, were being removed without them even asking for it. Back on Earth, the reaction was surprisingly quiet. People in cities, towns, and villages went about their lives. News channels showed the announcement, but the cameras only caught calm faces, not panic. Scientists continued their research. Farmers continued to harvest their crops. Children went to school. It was almost as if the entire planet had known this decision was coming and had already prepared for it in silence. The governments of Earth immediately convened. Unlike other civilizations that might have shouted, demanded, or protested, human leaders met behind closed doors. They talked in careful tones, but there was no anger. There was no fear. Instead, there was a quiet determination. Humanity did not need permission to live or to grow, and it certainly did not need validation from the Council. Plans were quickly reviewed, and orders quietly passed down the chain. Everything from spaceports to diplomatic offices started preparing for an organized exit. People outside government circles began to notice small changes. Communications to distant colonies slowed. Ships that usually carried humans for trade or research were being recalled. Engineers and scientists who had worked on shared projects with alien species were being given instructions to finish and secure their work before leaving. It was precise, almost surgical. Yet there was no panic. Humans seemed to understand something that the rest of the galaxy did not, that this was not the end of their story, but a beginning. Even the media, which in the past had thrived on sensationalism, struggled to capture the mood. Headlines could have screamed disaster, but most simply reported the facts. Galactic Council votes to expel Earth. Humanity accepts decision with silence. No retaliation seen from Earth. It was as if the planet itself was telling the galaxy, "We hear you. We are ready. And we will move forward on our own terms." In the midst of this quiet, humans themselves were having conversations that revealed their true nature. Families spoke in calm tones about the future. Communities discussed how they would ensure that children, the elderly, and the vulnerable were taken care of as humanity began withdrawing from galactic affairs. Engineers and pilots quietly double-checked equipment, not out of fear of failure, but out of respect for their work and for each other. It was a strange mix of seriousness and hope, a combination that made the decision to leave seem less like exile and more like an intentional choice, Some alien observers tried to contact Earth to understand the reaction. Messages were sent, repeated, even insistent. Diplomatic envoys reached out through secure channels. But Earth did not respond in anger or pleading. Instead, the communications bounced back or were quietly set aside for review. The silence was confusing and even frustrating. Many in the galaxy believed that humans would be desperate, panicked, or even violent. Instead, humans were calm, organized, and prepared. Looking back, it seemed almost as if humanity had anticipated this moment for years. Plans that had been hidden from the public eye began to make sense. Emergency protocols were activated. Spaceships, previously stationed on distant planets for research or trade, were quietly moving back to Earth's orbit. Resources were being consolidated, not destroyed. Knowledge, technology, and information that humans had shared with other civilizations were being carefully archived or recalled. Every move was precise, yet invisible to most outside observers. While the rest of the galaxy debated and speculated, humans were walking toward a future they would define themselves. There was no anger, no revenge. Humans did not see this expulsion as punishment. They saw it as an opportunity to build, to explore, and to grow without interference. The silence of humanity, so often mistaken for weakness, was actually strength. It was patience. It was clarity. It was a message louder than any words. We do not need the galaxy's approval to continue living, learning, and thriving. In cities, people talked in hushed tones about what might come next. Children played under the shadow of enormous communication towers, unaware of the decisions being made above them. Scientists worked late into the night, scribbling equations and running simulations, confident that the human race had the capability to survive and flourish. Farmers looked at the land with determination, knowing that food, resources, and sustainability were part of the plan. It was a strange calm that carried a powerful energy. As the council celebrated its decision, they failed to understand one important thing. Humans did not need their permission or recognition. Humans had survived countless challenges on Earth wars, natural disasters, pandemics, and economic collapses. They had learned, adapted, and innovated every time. Being expelled from galactic society was simply another challenge, another obstacle that humans would face not with fear, but with intelligence and unity. And so, as part one of this story closed, the galaxy watched in confusion and amazement. A planet that had been deemed rebellious, unpredictable, and chaotic was responding in a way no one expected, with calm, with precision, and with dignity. The humans had heard the vote, understood its meaning, and were already taking action. But the galaxy had no idea what that action would lead to. For humans, this was not the end. It was the quiet beginning of something far greater, a story that the galaxy would only understand much later. When it was too late to intervene, humanity had been told to leave. And humanity would leave. But it would do so on its own terms, in its own way, and without a backward glance. And in that quiet, calm preparation, there was something the galaxy could not take away: hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that the future belonged to those who dared to define it for themselves. The world seemed almost unchanged at first. Streets bustled with life. Children laughed in playgrounds. Office workers hurried to meetings, and the hum of machines filled factories and transport systems. To any outside observer, it looked like nothing had happened. But beneath this ordinary surface, something extraordinary was unfolding. Humanity, having heard the verdict from the Galactic Council, was quietly and purposefully preparing to respond in its own way. No one expected the reaction to be calm. After all, expulsion from the galaxy was no small matter. Entire civilizations had fallen into chaos when faced with lesser threats. Panic, protests, and desperate attempts to plead for mercy were the normal responses. Yet humanity was different. There was no shouting. There was no hysteria. There was an unspoken understanding across the planet. The vote of the Council was not a judgment that required argument. It was merely a fact to be acknowledged, a challenge to be managed. Governments moved quickly. Emergency councils convened in secure locations, discussing strategies and contingency plans. But unlike most bureaucracies under pressure, these meetings were marked by efficiency and clarity rather than confusion and fear. Leaders did not argue endlessly. They did not accuse one another or blame past mistakes. Every discussion focused on practical steps, recalling diplomats, securing research facilities, and ensuring the safety of citizens across Earth and in off-world colonies. On the streets, the ordinary citizen noticed subtle changes. Communications from distant human colonies, which had previously flowed freely, began to decrease. Ships that once ferried goods and personnel between planets were quietly redirected back to Earth. Engineers and technicians received instructions to secure technologies that had been shared with other civilizations. Factories that had produced equipment for interstellar trade were repurposing resources to serve local needs. Each decision was small on its own, but together they formed a massive, coordinated effort to protect humanity's future. The calmness was striking to alien observers who were monitoring the situation. They expected panic. They expected humans to make mistakes under pressure. But instead, humans displayed a level of coordination and maturity that few species had ever witnessed. From scientists in their laboratories to pilots in space stations, everyone seemed to understand that this was a turning point. Not an end, but the beginning of something new. Inside the research facilities that humans had built on moons and distant planets, teams worked tirelessly to wrap up joint projects with alien species. Equipment that had been loaned or shared was carefully disassembled and returned. Data was downloaded and secured. There was no rush, no anger, no spite. Each person understood the importance of leaving things in order. It was not about punishment for others. It was about responsibility and ensuring that humanity could move forward without leaving chaos behind. Even communication networks were systematically shut down or rerouted. Alien messages that once poured in from every corner of the galaxy were filtered. Some were archived, some ignored, and some returned with polite notifications that humans were temporarily unavailable. From the outside, it might have seemed like silence or withdrawal. But in truth, humans were preparing for a controlled exit, quiet, deliberate, and free from unnecessary conflict. Families and communities played their part too. Parents discussed the situation with children in honest but reassuring ways, emphasizing resilience, cooperation, and adaptability. Communities shared resources, ensuring that those in need would not be left behind. The elderly received extra care, and vulnerable populations were prioritized in evacuation and relocation plans. Every human, in one way or another, became part of the collective effort to ensure a smooth transition. Meanwhile, the media struggled to make sense of the calm. Headlines could have screamed disaster or despair, but most simply reported facts. Galactic Council expels Earth. Humans respond with silence. No aggression seen from humanity. Commentators tried to analyze the reasoning, the motives, and the potential consequences, but none could predict the quiet determination that was unfolding on Earth. The humans had no interest in debating the galaxy's judgment. They were focused on the practical steps necessary to protect themselves and their future. Out in space, ships that had been stationed across the galaxy began their journey back toward Earth. It was done discreetly, almost invisibly. Observation drones from other civilizations noted the movement, but no alarms were raised. These were not aggressive maneuvers. They were careful, organized, and intentional. Humans did not leave chaos in their wake. They did not sabotage systems or burn bridges. Everything was retrieved, secured, and cataloged for safekeeping. Some alien species attempted to communicate, sending messages that were urgent or insistent. "Why are you not protesting?" they asked. "Why are you not resisting?" Human leaders chose not to respond aggressively. Instead, they quietly acknowledged the messages internally and continued with the plans already in motion. Silence, in this case, was not ignorance. It was strategy. It was confidence. It was the understanding that sometimes action speaks louder than words. On Earth, life continued alongside these quiet preparations. Children went to school, oblivious to the cosmic drama unfolding above their heads. Workers went about their jobs, maintaining essential systems that would support the upcoming transition. Farmers cultivated the land, engineers maintained energy grids, and scientists conducted research, all with a sense of purpose and focus. No one panicked. No one faltered. Humans had learned, through centuries of survival, that preparation and calm resolve were far more effective than panic. Even ordinary conversations reflected the mindset of humanity. People spoke with quiet optimism about the future, not anger at the council. They discussed how life would continue, how colonies could be managed independently, and how knowledge and technology could be preserved for future generations. The conversation was not about revenge or bitterness. It was about responsibility, resilience, and the hope that humanity could thrive even outside the galactic system. As the weeks passed, the galaxy began to realize something unexpected. Humans were not merely complying with the Council's expulsion. They were transforming it into an opportunity. By quietly consolidating resources, securing knowledge, and preparing citizens, humans were laying the groundwork for a new Chapter 1 that no alien species could dictate or control. In government chambers, scientists' labs, and space stations across Earth's colonies, humans worked together with an unprecedented level of coordination. There was no chaos, no blame, no hesitation. Every decision, every movement, every plan was carefully calculated. This was not simply a reaction to being expelled. It was a proactive step toward independence, security, and the creation of a future on their own terms. And all the while, the galaxy watched in confusion and growing concern. Humans, who had always been loud, unpredictable, and sometimes reckless, were moving with a precision and patience that few had anticipated. While other civilizations assumed the expulsion would provoke desperation, the opposite was happening. Humans were calm. Humans were organized. Humans were ready. It was in this calmness that humanity showed its true nature. They did not need the approval of the galaxy to survive. They did not need permission to thrive. And they certainly did not need validation to move forward. The quiet strength of humans was not just about their technology, knowledge, or resources. It was about their unity, their determination, and their willingness to face challenges together. As Part 2 of this story closes, it becomes clear that humanity's response was far more than simple compliance. It was a deliberate, calculated, and hopeful act of self-preservation. While the galaxy debated, speculated, and even celebrated, humans were quietly preparing for a future where they would not be bound by the judgments of others. They were reclaiming control of their destiny, step by step, without chaos, without anger, and without fear. The world appeared calm on the surface, but underneath, a great wave of preparation and determination was building. Humanity was not panicking. Humanity was not begging. Humanity was not fighting. Humanity was acting, quietly and deliberately, to ensure that when the galaxy turned its eyes away, they would not just survive, they would thrive. And in this quiet response, there was a lesson that the galaxy would soon have to learn. Humans, when faced with a challenge, do not simply react. They prepare. They adapt. They endure. And most importantly, They do so with a quiet strength that few other civilizations could ever understand. The Council had expelled Earth. Humanity accepted the decision. But in accepting it, humans were not defeated. They were moving forward, together, ready for a future that no vote, no law, and no alien authority could dictate. Humanity's journey was only just beginning, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming next. By the time the departure protocol was fully set into motion, the galaxy was beginning to notice something remarkable. Humans were not just responding to the Council's expulsion. They were executing a plan that was as organized as it was quiet. While other civilizations had reacted with anger, panic, or attempts to negotiate, humans were moving with precision and purpose. They were leaving the galaxy on their own terms, and they were doing it without a single act of aggression. The departure protocol was not something humans had developed overnight. It had been a careful, long-term strategy, crafted with the knowledge that one day they might face exclusion from the larger galactic community. For years, they had prepared quietly, building infrastructure that could support large-scale relocation, storing resources, and ensuring that knowledge, technology, and people could be moved safely. Now, the time had come to put the plan into action. Across Earth, from bustling cities to remote settlements, human activity changed subtly but decisively. Spaceports, which had once been hubs for intergalactic trade, began shifting their focus inward. Ships that had been scattered across colonies and research stations were recalled, guided back to orbit in carefully timed rotations. Engineers and pilots coordinated silently, using algorithms and schedules so precise that every vessel moved without collision, delay, or confusion. At the same time, governments worked behind the scenes to ensure that citizens were prepared. Families received clear instructions about travel schedules, resource distribution, and temporary accommodations. Schools, hospitals, and workplaces adjusted operations to support the movement. People were not panicked. They were informed and ready. Children, for the most part, continued their routines, learning about math, science, and history, while absorbing lessons about resilience and cooperation in subtle ways. Even as the humans prepared for departure, they maintained their responsibilities to each other. Medical teams ensured that the sick and elderly were prioritized. Emergency response units coordinated logistics for people in remote areas. Farmers and energy providers managed production to sustain both local populations and those preparing to move. Every human action seemed small in isolation, but together, these actions formed an enormous, coordinated effort that no outside observer could fully comprehend. Alien civilizations were confused. Observers watched as human ships quietly left distant colonies, returning to Earth or moving to uncharted space without making a single aggressive move. Trade routes once dominated by human fleets suddenly went empty. Research stations that relied on human expertise slowed, then halted, leaving alien scientists scrambling. It was as if humanity had vanished almost overnight, but without chaos, without destruction, and without warning. The galaxy tried to understand. Council members demanded answers, sending messages and envoys to Earth. Why are you leaving without protest? They asked. Why do you not fight? Humans did not respond aggressively or defensively. They simply acted according to the plan. To them, this was not about confrontation. It was about survival, independence, and securing a future that no vote or decree could control. In orbit around Earth, fleets of ships moved with precision. They carried millions of people, vast amounts of knowledge, and invaluable technology. Laboratories, archives, and research centers were carefully packed, with critical equipment secured for transport. Ships were designed to sustain life for extended periods, capable of self-sufficient operations far from Earth. Engineers, pilots, and scientists worked tirelessly, often through long hours of darkness and silence. ensuring that nothing would be left behind or lost. On Earth itself, communities rallied to support the movement. Volunteers assisted with packing and distribution of supplies. Local governments coordinated transportation and accommodations for citizens. Schools doubled as information centers, sharing instructions and updates to families. In cities and towns, people moved with a sense of purpose, quietly and efficiently, without fear or panic. The calmness of humans during such a monumental event was extraordinary to witness. Even media coverage reflected the human approach. Journalists documented the departure with honesty and precision, avoiding sensationalism. They reported on the logistics, the stories of ordinary families, and the incredible coordination required to move entire populations. There was no hysteria in the headlines, only admiration for the organization and determination of humanity. Audiences across the galaxy watched, increasingly aware that what they had assumed would be a moment of chaos had become a testament to human ingenuity and resolve throughout the process. Humans displayed a remarkable ability to manage both emotion and responsibility. While other civilizations might have panicked under the pressure of leaving entire systems, humans remained calm and rational. Emotional responses were controlled and expressed constructively. People supported one another, collaborated efficiently, and ensured that even the most vulnerable were cared for. It was a combination of intelligence, empathy, and foresight that allowed the departure protocol to succeed. Communication with other civilizations was limited, carefully managed, and polite. Humans did not issue threats or demands. They did not burn bridges or sabotage systems. Instead, messages were strategic, explaining timelines, offering assistance in winding down joint operations, and requesting that remaining alien collaborators respect their departure. It was a graceful exit, designed to minimize conflict while maximizing efficiency. The galaxy began to realize that humans had anticipated this moment for years. The meticulous planning, the disciplined execution, and the quiet confidence displayed by Earth citizens suggested that this was not an impulsive reaction, but a well-thought-out plan. Humans had built infrastructure, reserves, and systems to ensure their survival, and they were now implementing that plan flawlessly in colonies beyond Earth. Humans coordinated remotely. Administrators, engineers, and pilots guided operations from a distance, maintaining control over ships, equipment, and personnel. Communication networks ensured that instructions were precise, reducing errors and confusion. It was a massive, synchronized effort that showcased the adaptability and resourcefulness of the human race. Even as the galaxy tried to intervene, it became clear that humans were not interested in confrontation. Alien ships attempted to block certain routes, questioning the movement of human fleets. Humans responded with patience and intelligence, rerouting ships, adjusting schedules, and avoiding conflict. There were no battles, no aggressive maneuvers, no destruction. Humanity demonstrated that strength lay not in force, but in careful planning, discipline, and unity. On Earth, the move was one of quiet determination. People celebrated small victories, the safe departure of a fleet, the secure transfer of critical technology, the successful coordination of families and communities. Children were taught lessons about resilience and teamwork. Adults worked tirelessly to ensure that systems remained operational and that no one was left behind. The planet itself seemed to pulse with a sense of purpose, as if it were participating in the human plan. As days turned into weeks, more ships departed, leaving the galaxy with fewer and fewer humans in previously inhabited colonies. Trade and communication networks adjusted to the absence, but the humans continued without hesitation. They were not running away. They were moving forward on a path of their own making. The departure protocol was more than just logistics. It was a statement of independence, a demonstration of humanity's ability to take control of its own destiny. In this phase of departure, Humanity proved its resilience and foresight. Every step was deliberate, every action considered. There were no accidents, no panic, no wasted resources. People supported one another, communities coordinated flawlessly, and families faced the challenge together. The galaxy watched, increasingly amazed at the combination of calm intelligence and determination that allowed humans to execute such a monumental plan without chaos. By the time the last fleets departed Earth's orbit, the galaxy was forced to take notice. Humans had left not because they were defeated or exiled, but because they had chosen to move forward on their own terms. They had not destroyed, argued, or begged. They had acted quietly, deliberately, and efficiently, demonstrating a level of unity and foresight that few other civilizations could match. And as Part 3 concludes, humanity's departure protocol had succeeded beyond expectation. The galaxy had assumed that expulsion would create fear, chaos, and desperation. Instead, humans had responded with calm intelligence and remarkable coordination. They were leaving, yes, but they were doing so with dignity, strategy, and hope. And beyond the stars, a new chapter of human history was beginning, one that no vote, no council, and no alien decision could dictate. Humanity was walking out of the galaxy's control, not in anger, not in fear, but in quiet confidence. They were ready to face the unknown, to chart new paths, and to build a future entirely on their own terms. The departure protocol was more than a plan. It was a declaration that humanity's story was theirs to write, and they would do so without looking back. At first, the galaxy barely noticed the full impact of humanity's departure. Ships had left distant colonies, research stations had gone quiet, and communication lines had slowed, but to many civilizations, it seemed like a temporary pause. After all, humans had always been bold and unpredictable. Maybe this was just another one of their unusual behaviors. Many in the Galactic Council dismissed it as minor, thinking humans would eventually return or complain. They assumed Earth would falter without alliances, trade, and interstellar support. But slowly, the reality began to hit. Systems and colonies that had relied on human technology started to struggle. Supply chains that had always been managed by human engineers faltered. Vital research projects halted when no human experts were available. Space travel routes that humans had maintained became inefficient, even dangerous. And yet, there were no protests, no desperate messages, no calls for help from Earth. Humanity had left quietly, yet the ripple effects were enormous. The Council grew uneasy. They had assumed that humans, when cornered, would plead, protest, or even strike. They had assumed the departure would create chaos for Earth itself. But every prediction failed. Earth continued to function smoothly. Communities thrived. Technology and knowledge were carefully secured. Families were safe. Humans were not desperate. They were prepared. And the galaxy had underestimated them. Trade networks began to feel the loss immediately. Many species had depended on human innovation for transportation, energy, and communications. Without humans managing key systems, some colonies faced shortages. Starships that once traveled safely through well-mapped routes now encountered delays and accidents. Factories that relied on human engineers struggled to maintain production. Slowly, the rest of the galaxy realized just how much human expertise had been embedded in the interstellar system. Alien leaders became alarmed. They tried to contact Earth again, expecting urgency or confusion. Yet the humans remained calm and strategic. Messages went unanswered or received polite replies. Our priorities are focused on preparation. Assistance will be offered only where necessary for safety. Otherwise, we are moving forward. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed like humans had vanished intentionally. And in a way, they had. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued with remarkable efficiency. People went about daily routines, but everything was coordinated to support the broader goal. Ships were maintained, resources were monitored, and knowledge was carefully archived. Scientists shared instructions with each other about relocating sensitive equipment and data. Engineers worked in shifts to ensure that spacecraft and stations were operating perfectly. Even the youngest members of society learned lessons about resilience, cooperation, and the importance of preparation. In distant colonies, humans coordinated remotely. Administrators ensured that critical systems were functioning, while families continued to settle into temporary arrangements. Food, energy, and medical supplies were distributed efficiently, demonstrating the foresight and care of human planning. Even without the support of the galactic community, humans maintained order. There was no panic. There was no chaos. Just careful, deliberate action. The galaxy, however, was in growing panic. Species that had once considered humans troublesome began to recognize how vital Earth had been. Communications networks failed in some regions. Mining operations slowed. Medical support systems and colonies faltered. Many species realized that humanity had been more than just another civilization. They had been a backbone for interstellar society in ways no one had fully appreciated until now. Galactic. Analysts attempted to quantify the loss, but the effects were complicated. Human ingenuity had been woven into countless systems: trade, research, transportation, energy, and even diplomacy. The absence of humans disrupted far more than anyone had predicted. Some leaders admitted privately that expelling Earth had been a mistake, but by then, it was too late. The humans had acted quietly, efficiently, and independently. As the weeks passed, the council grew frantic. Emergency meetings were called, messages were sent, and attempts to locate human fleets intensified. Analysts tried to predict human behavior, but all models failed. The humans were no longer reacting, they were acting. Every decision was proactive, every movement deliberate. The galaxy's attempts to regain control only highlighted how unprepared they had been for such an independent and organized civilization. Back on Earth, the mood remained calm but determined. Families continued their routines, schools operated efficiently, and communities supported one another. But behind the calm, there was intense activity. Ships were being prepared for long-term travel beyond the known regions of space. Engineers and scientists secured technology, ensured safety protocols were in place, and tested every system for reliability. Nothing was left to chance. Humanity had taken control of its own destiny, and no external force could intervene. Alien civilizations attempted to interfere at first, trying to block trade routes or slow the movement of fleets. But humans responded with intelligence and patience. Ships were rerouted, schedules were adjusted, and safety maintained without confrontation. Humans proved that strength lay not in aggression, but in careful planning, resilience, and unity. Their calm and calculated actions frustrated those who had expected chaos. Even as pressure grew, humans maintained their ethics and responsibility. They ensured that no one was left behind and that any assistance required for survival was provided. Medical teams continued to operate, food distribution remained steady, and families were protected. The departure protocol was not only a strategy for leaving, it was a demonstration of humanity's capacity for empathy, foresight, and leadership. The galaxy's panic became more evident as time went on. Systems failed without human oversight. Research that had depended on human scientists stalled. Trade networks broke down. Even planets that had previously criticized Earth now found themselves struggling. Civilization, for all its technological advancement, realized how deeply dependent it had been on human contribution. Meanwhile, humans continued their quiet progress. There was no anger, no confrontation, only determination. Ships moved steadily toward new regions of space, carrying people, knowledge, and technology. Colonies were prepared for temporary independence. Earth itself functioned smoothly as a hub for ongoing operations. Every step demonstrated discipline, foresight, and unity that the galaxy had not anticipated. Messages from the Council became increasingly desperate. Analysts and diplomats begged humans to return, to negotiate, or at least to explain themselves. But humans had learned to act on their own terms. They responded only when necessary, and always with clarity and calm. Their message was clear. We are moving forward. We will not be swayed by fear, threats, or criticism. Our focus is our future, and we will secure it ourselves. By now, the galaxy understood the magnitude of what had happened. Humanity had not simply left, they had reshaped the balance of power, technology, and influence. Their absence created voids in systems that no other civilization could easily fill. The Council realized too late that expelling Earth had been a grave miscalculation. Humanity's careful preparation, unity, and independence had turned a perceived defeat into one of the most powerful demonstrations of agency the galaxy had ever seen. Even as panic spread across alien civilizations, Earth remained calm and orderly. The departure protocol continued without interruption. People worked together seamlessly, demonstrating not just intelligence, but empathy, discipline, and foresight. Children learned lessons about cooperation, adults focused on responsibilities, and leaders coordinated the enormous operation with precision. Humanity's calm determination was a quiet but undeniable power dot by the end of this phase. The galaxy had no choice but to watch in awe. Humans had left not because they were forced, but because they chose to take control of their destiny. They had not destroyed, protested, or argued. They had acted quietly, deliberately, and intelligently. And as the consequences of their departure became obvious, it became clear that humanity had not merely survived expulsion. They had turned it into an opportunity for independence, growth, and self-determination. And so, as Part 4 concludes, the galaxy faced a new reality. Systems faltered without human oversight. Trade slowed. Research halted. Civilization, for all its complexity, realized how deeply humanity had been integrated into its foundation. And yet, humans continued forward, calm, united, and purposeful, proving that their strength lay not in rebellion or aggression, but in preparation, unity, and the quiet courage to define their own future. By the time humans decided to send their message to the galaxy, the Council and countless civilizations were already overwhelmed. For weeks, systems had been failing, colonies had slowed, and trade routes had faltered. Analysts, diplomats, and military leaders scrambled to understand what was happening. But no one had expected humanity to respond in such a calm, controlled, and deliberate way. Then, without warning, the message appeared. It was broadcast across every corner of the galaxy simultaneously, reaching every council chamber, space station, and diplomatic outpost. There was no drama, no emotional outburst, no anger or complaint in the message. Just simple, clear words that carried immense power. Humanity had accepted the Council's decision and would not return. The tone was deliberate and calm. It was not a message of revenge or protest. It was a statement of fact. Humans were not asking for permission, pleading for recognition, or threatening retaliation. They were simply announcing that they were moving forward on their own terms. For those who had always underestimated humans, the message was shocking. It revealed a level of maturity, discipline, and self-determination that few had ever seen. Across Earth, the reaction was quiet but purposeful. The message had been carefully crafted by leaders, scientists, and communication experts. Every word had been reviewed to ensure it conveyed humanity's intent without provoking conflict. Citizens continued their daily routines, supporting one another and maintaining systems, while engineers and pilots monitored the movement of fleets. The message was only a formal declaration of something humanity had been doing for weeks, walking out of the galaxy's control with calm and precision in colonies far from Earth. Humans continued to coordinate remotely. Administrators and leaders guided operations, ensuring that every ship, facility, and station was operating as planned. Families adjusted to the new routines. Scientists continued research that would support the next phase of exploration and survival. Even as the galaxy reacted to the broadcast, humans remained focused on their mission to move forward and secure their own future. The galaxy's response was immediate and intense. Some civilizations were angry, feeling insulted by the calm acceptance of expulsion. Others were panicked, realizing that humans had been essential in maintaining trade, infrastructure, and safety in multiple systems. Council members demanded explanations. Emergency sessions were called, and analysts tried desperately to predict humanity's next move. Yet the humans had already anticipated these reactions. Their plans accounted for disruption, criticism, and pressure from the outside. They had acted carefully, ensuring that every contingency had been considered and every system accounted for. Meanwhile, humans continued their withdrawal from the galaxy. Ships moved with precision, carrying millions of people, technology, and knowledge to new, uncharted regions of space. Every fleet was coordinated to avoid collision, delay, or inefficiency. Engineers and pilots monitored each vessel, making adjustments when needed, but always following the plan. Families, communities, and scientists remained safe, supported, and informed. It was a massive, synchronized effort that demonstrated the unity and foresight of humanity. Even the youngest humans were aware, in their own ways, of the importance of this moment. Children learned about teamwork, cooperation, and resilience, seeing adults manage complex operations calmly and efficiently. Schools remained open, providing stability and education while contributing to the larger effort. Communities worked together to ensure that resources, supplies, and knowledge were available where they were needed most. There was no chaos, no panic, only determination, discipline, and hope. Alien civilizations tried to intervene. Some sent fleets to block critical routes. Others attempted to demand explanations or negotiate terms. But humans did not engage in conflict. Ships were rerouted, operations were adjusted, and priorities remained clear. Humanity had learned that strength was not in confrontation, but in preparation, coordination, and unity. By acting deliberately, they maintained control over their destiny while avoiding unnecessary conflict. The final broadcast also carried a subtle, yet powerful message. Humanity would build its own future, independent of the galaxy. There was no arrogance, only confidence. Humans did not boast of superiority or seek vengeance. They simply stated a truth that the galaxy had refused to recognize for years. Earth was capable of surviving, thriving, and growing without approval or intervention from alien civilizations. In the aftermath of the message, the galaxy was forced to confront its own mistakes. Systems that had depended on human expertise continued to falter. Trade slowed. Research projects stalled. Colonies struggled. Those who had dismissed humans as unpredictable, loud, or reckless now recognized the quiet strength that had allowed them to execute the departure protocol flawlessly. Humanity had not just survived expulsion. They had demonstrated power, resilience, and intelligence that few civilizations could match. Back on Earth, life remained structured and focused. People supported one another, ensuring that every community had access to resources, knowledge, and guidance. Scientists continued to develop solutions for long-term survival. Engineers and pilots ensured that all technology was operational and secure. The planet itself seemed to pulse with a sense of purpose and determination, reflecting the quiet confidence of its people. Even as alien civilizations panicked, humans continued their mission without interruption. Every step, Every decision and every movement reflected careful planning and foresight. Humanity had anticipated potential challenges, including interference from other civilizations, and had created strategies to address them without conflict. This level of preparation and calm determination further emphasized the unique strength of the human race that the galaxy's leaders struggled to understand. How could a civilization, faced with expulsion and isolation, respond with such composure and foresight? How could humans leave without chaos, destruction, or fear? And most importantly, how had they anticipated every consequence so thoroughly? Humanity's actions challenged long-held assumptions about power, resilience, and independence in interstellar politics. Meanwhile, humans themselves were not focused on the reactions of others. Their attention remained on the practical tasks at hand. Ships were maintained, resources were secured, and communities were supported. Families continued their routines while contributing to the larger mission. Education, research, and innovation continued, ensuring that the human race would be prepared for the next stage of its journey. There was no distraction, no confusion, only focus, unity, and purpose. The message to the galaxy also had a deeper impact. It was not merely a statement of departure. It was a demonstration of values. Humanity had acted responsibly, ethically, and with foresight. They had left systems intact wherever possible, ensured the safety of citizens, and maintained order throughout the process. By doing so, humans showed that true strength lies not in aggression or control, but in preparation, cooperation, and the ability to act with integrity under pressure. For the rest of the galaxy, this was a lesson that would not be forgotten. Analysts, historians, and leaders studied the departure protocol, the broadcasts, and the actions of humans to understand how a single civilization could execute such a complex operation without chaos. They realized that humans were not just survivors, they were strategists, planners, and visionaries. Their calm, deliberate, and unified response challenged long-held beliefs about what it meant to be powerful and capable. As Part 5 closes, the humans had not only sent their final message, they had demonstrated the essence of their civilization. They had acted with clarity, purpose, and dignity. The galaxy could no longer assume control, influence, or authority over Earth. Humanity had taken the next step in its journey, walking out of the galaxy's oversight without aggression, without anger, and without fear. The departure protocol had achieved more than logistics or evacuation. It had shown that humans, when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, could respond with intelligence, unity, and resilience. They had accepted the Council's decision, but in doing so, they had also reclaimed control over their future. Humanity had made it clear they would thrive on their own terms, and they would do so without looking back. And as the last signals of the broadcast faded across the galaxy, every civilization realized a hard truth. Humans had not just left, they had set the stage for a future that belonged entirely to themselves. They had acted quietly, deliberately, and with purpose, proving that true power does not come from fear or aggression, but from preparation, unity, and the courage to define one's own destiny. Years had passed since humanity left the galaxy's central systems. By now, the consequences of their departure were clear to everyone else. Trade networks had slowed, research projects had stalled, and many civilizations struggled to maintain infrastructure that humans had once managed. Those who had once celebrated Earth's expulsion now realized just how deeply humanity had been woven into the fabric of interstellar society. Meanwhile, humans were thriving. They had not rushed, panicked, or struggled under pressure. Instead, they had used the time wisely, building new colonies, advancing their technology, and creating systems that worked independently of the Galactic Council. Their careful preparation and foresight had paid off. Every colony, every ship, and every community had been designed to be self-sufficient, ensuring that humans could survive and prosper, even in uncharted regions of space. Out on each new colony, life flourished. Cities were built with both efficiency and humanity in mind, combining advanced technology with spaces designed for comfort and community. People worked together, learning to manage resources, grow food, and maintain energy systems. Communities were not just functional, they were places where humans cared for one another, sharing knowledge, skills, and responsibilities. In these new settlements, humans had finally created the kind of civilization that reflected their values: unity, resilience, and hope. The older generations, who had guided the departure protocol, continued to lead and mentor. They shared stories of Earth, the Council, and the decisions that had led to this new era. Children learned about the past, but not with fear or anger. They were taught lessons of foresight, preparation, and responsibility. They understood that humanity had survived because of cooperation, careful planning, and courage. Every new generation grew up confident, capable, and aware of the sacrifices and wisdom of those who had come before. Science and exploration became central to human life. Freed from the constraints of galactic politics, humans could now innovate without limits. Research labs developed new energy sources, medical advancements, and interstellar travel technologies. Explorers charted distant regions of space, discovering planets and systems that no one had mapped before. Humanity's curiosity, ingenuity, and courage drove them forward, demonstrating the very traits that the Council had once questioned. Despite their success, humans remained humble. They did not seek revenge on those who had expelled them. They did not try to dominate or control. Instead, they focused on what mattered most: survival, growth, and the well-being of their people. Their society reflected their understanding that true strength was not in conflict, but in unity, preparation, and ethical action. Meanwhile, the galaxy watched from afar, slowly realizing the impact of what had occurred. Analysts and historians studied the events surrounding Earth's expulsion and departure. Many civilizations came to respect the humans, not out of fear, but out of admiration for their intelligence, discipline, and courage. Some tried to re-establish contact, curious about the systems humans had built and the knowledge they had preserved. But humans were selective, responding only when it aligned with their values and priorities. They had learned that their focus was their future, not the approval of others. Life in these new colonies was not without challenges. There were technical problems, harsh planetary conditions, and unexpected disasters. But humans had learned from centuries of survival on Earth. They faced each problem with determination, innovation, and cooperation. Each difficulty became a lesson, and each lesson strengthened their communities. The people worked together, solving problems with patience and intelligence, proving once again that resilience was the foundation of their society. Over time, humans built a network of colonies that spanned vast regions of space. Each colony was interconnected, but self-sufficient. Technology allowed for communication and coordination without dependence on outside systems. Resources were shared efficiently, and knowledge was preserved across multiple locations. Humans had created a civilization that was not only sustainable but adaptable, capable of thriving even if isolated for generations. Culturally, humanity flourished as well. Art, music, and literature reflected both the history of Earth and the new experiences in space. Stories of the Council, the departure protocol, and the courage of ordinary citizens were passed down, becoming part of the shared heritage. Festivals and community events celebrated unity, resilience, and discovery. Humans had not lost their spirit, they had amplified it, creating a culture that honored both tradition and progress. By now, even the youngest members of society understood their identity. They knew that humans were capable of facing any challenge, that cooperation was their greatest strength, and that preparation and foresight were keys to survival. Education focused not only on science and technology, but on ethics, responsibility, and the importance of community. Children were encouraged to explore, question, and innovate, while learning from the wisdom of those who had guided humanity through its most critical moments. The galaxy had also changed its perspective. Those who had once dismissed Earth as unpredictable and chaotic now acknowledged the foresight, intelligence, and discipline of humans. The expulsion, which had seemed like a victory for some, was now seen as a turning point that allowed humanity to grow stronger, independent, and more capable than ever before. The Council itself had learned a valuable lesson. Underestimating humanity had been a critical mistake. Back on the central colony, leaders reflected on what had been achieved. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy's control without anger, without chaos, and without regret. They had preserved knowledge, technology, and life. They had established new colonies, maintained order, and ensured that every person was cared for. Their success was a result of unity, careful planning, and a commitment to ethical action. In the quiet moments, people reflected on the past, but without bitterness. They remembered the Council's vote, the preparations that had followed, and the departure protocol. They understood that the galaxy had not welcomed them, but that rejection had given them an opportunity to define their own future. Humanity's story was no longer shaped by the decisions of others. It was theirs to write. Exploration continued to be a driving force. Humans traveled to uncharted systems, discovering new planets, life forms, and resources. Every discovery was shared with the colonies, expanding knowledge and strengthening communities. Technology advanced rapidly, and humans developed new forms of energy, transportation, and communication. Their progress was steady, guided by intelligence, experience, and the understanding that preparation and unity were essential to long-term success. Humanity also maintained a sense of moral responsibility. They did not exploit new worlds recklessly. They treated discovered planets with care, preserving ecosystems and resources. Decisions were made collectively, ensuring fairness and sustainability. Humans had learned from the mistakes of the past on Earth, understanding that true success required balance between advancement and responsibility, even as they thrived in these new regions of space. Humans remembered the lessons of their departure. The calm, deliberate actions that had guided them through the departure protocol became a model for future generations. They learned that preparation, patience, and unity were more powerful than aggression or haste. They understood that courage was not only about action, but also about wisdom, ethics, and the willingness to face challenges together. Over time, humanity built a civilization that was both resilient and inspiring. Communities were interconnected, but self-sufficient. Technology advanced, yet ethical, and people were both skilled and compassionate. Humanity had turned what the galaxy thought would be a punishment into an opportunity for growth, independence, and prosperity. They had created a society that no external force could dictate, and they had done so with dignity, intelligence, and hope. As the final chapter of this story concludes, it is clear that humanity's journey had transformed them. They had been expelled, yes, but they had walked away stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever. They had left the galaxy without anger, without chaos, and without fear, proving that true strength lies in unity, preparation, and ethical action. Humanity had claimed its future, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what it truly means to survive, thrive, and grow beyond limitations. Humanity's story was no longer about being part of the galaxy. It was about defining themselves, building a civilization based on their values, and thriving in a universe that had once rejected them. They had turned silence into strength, calm into power, and independence into a legacy that would last for generations. And in the distant reaches of space, humans looked to the stars with hope, curiosity, and confidence. They had walked out without looking back, but they had created a future worth facing. The galaxy had underestimated them, but humanity had proven that when people act together with intelligence, foresight, and unity, there is no challenge too great, no obstacle too vast, and no future they cannot shape.